A wise man once said, "Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake." This was the advice given by the Persian king Cyrus the Great to his son Cambyses. But when it came to mind, this did not prevent him from killing his own sister, Princess Ar, because she had an affair with her brother's bodyguard. Cambyses then went on to conquer Egypt, but his people did not appreciate the culture of the Egyptians. They destroyed many monuments, defiled their temples, committed countless atrocities. As a result, the gods were angry at them and sent a terrible plague on them. And although the Persians managed to stop its spread in Asia Minor, in Europe it continued to claim more and more victims. Soon it reached Athens, where it took the life of King Theseus, who was considered a demigod and was revered throughout Greece. The Athenians were terrified. To appease the gods, they decided to send an embassy to the Oracle of Delphi to find out how to get rid of the plague. The god Apollo told them they needed to find the hero Perseus, who was supposed to be wandering somewhere in the north. But even if they found him, the hero would only agree to help for a hefty ransom. So the Athenians set out on a difficult journey to find the semi-mythical Perseus. This is the story that unfolds in the 7th book of Herodotus Histories, a work that served as the basis for this video. But let's start at the very beginning. We are talking about the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition release of 2008, which contains all 9 books of the famous Greek historian's work in one volume. More than 40 years ago, this book became a bestseller and is still popular today because it tells of the deeds of the most outstanding men of antiquity, such as Cyrus, Croesus, Darius, Xerxes, and Themistocles. It covers a period from the reign of Cyrus the Great in the mid-6th century BC until the Greco-Persian Wars, lasting about 2 centuries. These events were caused by the attempts of the Achaemenid kings to conquer Greece. However, this is just one of the storylines in the vast narrative of Herodotus. In fact, he touches upon everything he considered important to understand the history of his time. He writes about geography, ethnography, customs, beliefs, and even statistics. His stories often take us far beyond the borders of Greece and Persia, traveling through Libya and Ethiopia, Scythia, and India. This is also a key feature that distinguishes Herodotus from other historians. He was the first to abandon the traditional strict chronological narrative in favor of a thematic approach, presenting the events in rough chronological order, but constantly moving back and forth in time. Herodotus collected his material for almost 30 years and used many sources, including official documents, diplomatic dispatches, letters, personal memoirs, as well as conversations with eyewitnesses. He checked the facts several times, traveled to many places himself, and made sure to interview various individuals about the events. But despite this, he cannot always be called objective. Herodotus was an ethnic Ionian, and so in his narrative, the Ionians are almost always portrayed in a positive light, while the Medes and Persians seem rather negative. He was also strongly influenced by Greek mythology and frequently inserts the stories of gods and heroes into his historical narratives. But even that doesn't make his work any less valuable. On the contrary, this gives it a special flavor and charm, drawing the reader into the world of ancient Greece. For example, he writes about how the Egyptian priests kept the sacred fire burning by placing 2 concave mirrors facing each other. When Herodotus heard this, he thought it was a miracle, but in reality, it was quite a simple optical trick known to all of us. But then he learned that people in those days considered it a gift from the gods, and this further fueled his faith in miracles. Here we come to another interesting point. The Greeks called Herodotus the father of history, but his work has nothing to do with modern historical science. If we compare it to modern historical works, it's more like a mixture of chronicles, travel notes, an encyclopedia, and a novel. It lacks any scientific apparatus, such as references to sources, and the language is quite ornate and metaphorical. Nevertheless, it is thanks to Herodotus that we learned about many events of world history. He was the first to tell about the royal road built by Darius in his empire, about the ancient Egyptian system of writing, about the art of about the structure of the Persian army, and much more. It is no coincidence that Herodotus's work had such a huge impact on subsequent generations. Moreover, he had a great influence on the cultural development of Europe. It was he who first described the Great Pyramids of Giza, and since then, the image of the Sphinx has become a symbol of wisdom and eternity, being depicted on coins, paintings, jewelry, and other objects. Even now, thousands of years later, we marvel at the descriptions of Herodotus. He tells us about the land of the Hyperboreans who lived beyond the north wind, where it was always summer and people never engaged in agriculture. Their main activity was making merry and celebrating, drinking wine, and composing poetry in honor of the gods. One wonders if this paradise actually existed or whether Herodotus simply invented it. However, there are also purely military campaigns that the author describes in detail. For example, the invasion of the Persians into Thrace or the Battle of the River Halys. It was during this battle that the legendary Spartan king Leonidas I, along with 300 warriors, held off a much larger Persian army. The battle lasted 3 days, after which the Spartans were forced to retreat. Of course, Herodotus does not ignore the famous Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, where the Athenians under the leadership of Miltiades defeated the Persians, led by Data. According to the historian, the Athenians were saved by their superior tactics. The Persians were armed with bows and arrows, javelins and swords, but they relied mainly on the strength of their numbers. Meanwhile, the Greeks fought in a tight phalanx formation, protecting each other with their shields and striking the enemy with their spears. The Persians began to suffer heavy losses and soon fled. Herodotus believed that this battle was a turning point in history, after which the Greeks realized they could defeat the Persians. But despite the victory, the Greeks were still apprehensive about the upcoming war, and so it happened. In 480 BC, the Persian king Xerxes invaded Greece with a huge army. The Greeks gathered an alliance, the leader of which was the Athenian statesman. Despite being outnumbered, the Greeks took up arms and defended their homeland. The Persians were forced to retreat, and they soon met again at the Strait of Cyprus, where the Greeks achieved a decisive victory over the Persians. This victory marked the end of the Greco-Persian Wars. Herodotus ends his work here saying, "I will now sing the glories of these men who were by no means inferior in courage and skill to the most valiant of the Hellenes, nor were the barbarians at all so very numerous, to make one think that flight was impossible." So ends the great poem of Herodotus, which tells of the wars between the Greeks and the Persians. We invite you to subscribe to our channel, where you will learn many interesting things about the history of ancient Greece. In the meantime, we highly recommend watching the video about the most significant battles of ancient Greece. And don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Until next time.